It started with silence. Not the kind of silence that comes from peace, but the kind that screams louder than words ever could. Christine sat on that couch holding back years of hurt, while Kody arms crossed eyes. Cold refused to see the woman who had stood beside him for over 2 decades. You could feel it in the room. The air was thick with truth, finally breaking through the cracks and right there in front of the cameras. She said it, "I don't want to be married to Kody anymore." That moment that was history being made on Sister Wives. If you're new here, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because we do not hold back. And if you've been watching this family from the beginning, I want to hear from you in the comments. What moment made you realize it was all falling apart? Today's story is not just a recap. It's a reckoning, a story about control disguised as unity, about women who stayed too long in a structure that was never built to love them back equally, about finally saying no. This episode doesn't just give us drama, it hands us the truth stripped raw. You're going to hear how Christine took back her power, how Janelle found clarity, and how Meri was left behind in the shadows of a love that had already died. So grab a drink, get comfortable, because we're about to walk straight into the real cracks of this so-called plural marriage, and what it truly cost the women who lived it. When Sister Wives first aired, it felt like we were being led in on a secret, this big, bold experiment in love, faith, and family. 4 women, 1 man, a dozen, plus kids. And they told us it was about unity, about choice, about a kind of love that didn't fit inside traditional lines. The show tried to sell us the image of a functional, happy, plural marriage. Sure, there were struggles, but back then the message was clear. This was a family built on shared values, shared parenting, shared love. But let's be real, that was the image, and the image started to crack fast forward to the most recent seasons, and you can feel it. The warmth is gone, the communication is frayed. There are no shared dinners, no loud, chaotic scenes of togetherness. Just one-on-one conversations filled with tense silence. And the kind of passive-aggressive remarks that say way more than the words themselves. And slowly, piece by piece, it became obvious this wasn't a united family anymore, this was a system. And Robyn, whether she meant to or not, had become the center of it. The so-called favorite wife narrative wasn't just gossip anymore, it was playing out right in front of us. Kody was always with her, the other wives. They were getting scraps of time, attention, and emotional investment. Christine saw it first, noticed the pattern, felt the shift. She would talk about how decisions were made without her, how Kody dismissed her concerns, how he stopped showing up not just physically but emotionally. He wasn't choosing her anymore. He wasn't prioritizing their kids. And over time, that emptiness grew. It wasn't just a bad phase, it was a realization. Janelle, always the more independent one, started to connect those dots too. She had tolerated distance from Kody for years, but Christine's pain hit something inside her. It made her question things she had long accepted. Meanwhile, Robyn kept saying she wanted the family to be whole, but for Christine and Janelle, it didn't feel like unity anymore. It felt like control, like they were expected to stay quiet, play along, and sacrifice their own happiness for a man who had already made his choice. And Christine, she started to wonder if love was supposed to hurt like this. If staying silent was really the right thing to do, you could almost see the moment Christine emotionally detached from Kody, and once it happened, there was no going back. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, it was quiet. It was years of being dismissed, finally settling into clarity, and it happened right there on camera, when she looked at him and said, "I don't want to be married to Kody anymore." There was no yelling, just truth, calm, firm, and completely done for years. Christine had played the role she thought she was supposed to. She raised kids, smiled through disappointment, swallowed her own needs, and kept trying to make it work. But slowly, painfully, she realized she was the only one trying. Kody wasn't just absent, he was cold. Moments when he refused to be intimate, when he made it clear that the romance was dead. And not because of a fight, but because he simply wasn't interested anymore. And he told her that plainly, Like she should just accept that the love was gone and keep the family going anyway. That's not a marriage, that's emotional abandonment. And Christine had been holding on, hoping for a long time, but everything inside her was starting to break. She could see what the future looked like if she stayed, and it was lonely. She'd already spent so many nights alone, so many holidays, where it felt like she and her kids were an afterthought, and the weight of always being the one to compromise, it had gotten too heavy. Then something shifted, we saw it. She started packing up the house, not angrily, not dramatically, just matter of fact like someone who finally knew what she needed to do. She labeled boxes, she folded blankets, she made lists. It wasn't just about leaving, it was about reclaiming herself. There was also that powerful moment when she told Kody he couldn't just come in and act like nothing had changed. She told him the door to the bedroom was locked, that he no longer had that access to her. It was one of the first times we saw Christine choose herself. Not the ideal, not the religion, not the image, but herself. This wasn't some impulsive decision, it was overdue. And she didn't just walk away from a man, she walked away from being invisible. Christine leaving didn't just shake the family, it cracked the entire foundation they'd built their lives on. And the aftermath was raw, uncomfortable, and incredibly telling. Kody didn't react with sadness or humility. He didn't ask how she was feeling or what he could have done differently. No, he reacted with anger, and not just any anger, the kind that masks something deeper. Hurt pride maybe, but mostly a refusal to take any accountability. He stood there almost stunned, like he couldn't believe Christine actually followed through for so long. He had assumed she would just stay quiet and fall in line. But now that she was actually leaving, he spun it into betrayal. He said she never tried that, she wasn't loyal. But viewers saw what loyalty really looked like. Christine had been loyal for years to the family, to the kids, to the ideal. But Kody had confused loyalty with submission. And once Christine stood up, it exposed the cracks in the entire dynamic. And then there was Robyn. Her reaction was one of the most talked about parts of the aftermath. She cried, she grieved. On the surface, it looked like heartbreak. But many fans couldn't help but wonder, was it genuine sadness? Or was she afraid? Afraid that the structure of control, the carefully stacked pyramid where she seemed to sit at the top, was starting to fall apart. Robyn had always been presented as the peacemaker, but when the balance shifted, her tears didn't come with solutions or empathy. They came with fear of losing what she'd quietly gained: Kody's attention, protection, and priority. And yet in the middle of all this storm, there was Christine grieving. Yes, but also calm, grounded at peace in a way we hadn't seen from her in years. She was no longer explaining herself, no longer trying to prove her worth to a man who had stopped seeing her long ago. She was walking into something unknown, but it was hers. Fans rallied behind her like never before. She became a symbol of quiet resistance, of a woman finally choosing happiness over endurance. And every time she smiled through the sadness, every time she looked directly into the camera and stood in her truth, you could feel it. This was the beginning of her real life. Janelle was always the quiet one, steady, practical, loyal to a fault for years. She kept her head down, focused on her kids, the family finances, the day-to-day grind. She wasn't the loudest voice in the room, but she was the one holding a lot of it together. And for a long time that was enough. But then something shifted. It was subtle at first, little comments, small expressions, hesitation. When Kody spoke, like he expected automatic agreement, then came the real turning points conversations, where Janelle stopped nodding along, one of the most striking moments, when she said point blank that she didn't feel like she was part of a functioning marriage. That sentence landed like a thunderclap. It was quiet, sure, calm, but there was no doubt in her voice she wasn't asking anymore. She was stating, and fans across the board felt it. Janelle wasn't pretending anymore. Watching Christine leave had sparked something in her, not jealousy, not competition, but clarity. Christine's decision had exposed just how one-sided things had become, and Janelle started seeing it too. The emotional distance, the lopsided priorities, the way Kody showed up only when it suited him or his image. She had always tried to keep the peace to be the reasonable one, but when peace becomes silence and silence becomes suppression, eventually even the quietest person starts to speak up. Her loyalty began shifting, not to the idea of the family, and certainly not to Kody, but to herself, and especially to her children watching her fiercely defend her sons. When Kody demanded blind obedience, that was a defining moment she wasn't willing to abandon her kids to protect a crumbling marriage. She stood firm even when it meant standing alone still. You could see her wrestling with it. Janelle isn't impulsive. She didn't make emotional exits or bold announcements. She processed slowly, but you could feel it building the awareness that things weren't working, that they hadn't been working for a long time, and more importantly, that she deserved more than just being tolerated. She deserved to be seen, to be heard, to be valued. By the time she started using the word separation, it was clear Janelle wasn't lost, she was waking up and she wasn't going back. Meri's journey is different from the others. In many ways, it's been the loneliest of all. While Christine, Janelle, and even Robyn have had their moments of growth, change, and emotional reckoning, Meri's path has been marked by a painful, slow fade. And let's be real, this wasn't something that happened overnight. The cracks in her marriage were there long before Christine decided to leave or Janelle started speaking her truth. Meri's heart had been slowly breaking for years. The catfish incident, the betrayal that rocked her entire world, was a defining moment for Meri. It was supposed to be a turning point, a wake-up call, but instead of being met with support, empathy, or understanding, Meri was left isolated. It wasn't just the catfish itself that destroyed her trust. It was Kody's reaction, his indifference to her pain. His refusal to acknowledge the depth of her hurt left Meri emotionally stranded. And it wasn't just the catfish incident, it was the way Kody continued to pull further and further away. Slowly, the woman who had once been his first wife found herself in a silent, suffocating corner of the family, yearning for a love and validation that never came. There were moments when you could see Meri clinging to a version of Kody that didn't exist anymore. It wasn't that she was blind to the reality of their relationship, she knew, but she still held on to the idea of what they once had, a love and connection that now seemed like a distant memory. She'd bring up old memories, trying to reignite that spark, trying to remind him of who they used to be, but the responses were always lukewarm, always distant. Kody had checked out long ago. He wasn't there for her, not in the way she needed him to be, and the silence. Oh, the silence, it became deafening. There were moments of rejection so subtle, so cold, that Meri couldn't help but feel invisible. She'd express her feelings, try to get Kody's attention, but it was as if she was speaking to a wall. The words went unacknowledged, her presence unappreciated. It wasn't just about physical distance, it was emotional abandonment. In the end, when Meri finally decided to leave, or at least to step back, it was almost like her departure mirrored what had been happening inside her for years, quiet, resigned, without fanfare. There was no dramatic exit. There didn't need to be. Her absence had already been felt long before she physically removed herself. Meri was no longer just a wife in Kody's world. She had become a ghost in her own marriage, and as heartbreaking as it was, it felt like the only way out for her was to quietly disappear, just as her connection with Kody had. As we reach the final act of this saga, it's clear the three women, Christine, Janelle, and Meri, have chosen their own paths toward independence. And each one of them has done it in their own way, reflecting the unique struggles they faced within the family dynamic. Christine, the first to break free, finally embraced her worth. She left behind a life where she was constantly undervalued, choosing to prioritize her happiness and her kids above all else for her. It was about reclaiming control, making the choice to move forward, even when it was painful. She showed us all what it looks like to break free from the shackles of a controlling and dismissive relationship. Her decision was a powerful act of self-love, even if it didn't come without its challenges. Janelle, on the other hand, made her move more quietly, but no less powerfully over time. Her loyalty shifted. She realized that she couldn't keep sacrificing her own happiness for the sake of a family that had long since stopped supporting her. The way she needed her decision was rooted in strength. And though it wasn't as explosive as Christine's, it was just as significant. Janelle's journey to independence wasn't about making a dramatic statement. It was about choosing herself, her kids, and her future. Meri, though isolated and often overlooked, finally reached her breaking point. After years of emotional neglect, she too stepped away. Her departure was quieter, but no less important. It wasn't just about leaving a man, it was about walking away from a version of herself that had been trapped in a toxic cycle. Meri's journey to independence wasn't about drama. It was about peace healing and choosing to exist outside of the constant emotional fog that had surrounded her for so long. And then there's Kody, left behind, confused and defensive. He's now surrounded by walls of his own, making the man who once had control of a plural family, who had all the power, now finds himself alone in his defensive stance, unable to understand why everything fell apart. He's lost the women who were supposed to be his support system, but he's too entrenched in his own pride to take responsibility. He's been left to question everything, but still too stubborn to see where he went wrong. The family as we once knew it gone, and perhaps it was never really there to begin with. What seemed like a united front, a shared commitment to the lifestyle, has crumbled piece by piece. The walls Kody built have kept everyone out, even the people closest to him. But for Christine, Janelle, and Meri, this isn't the end. It's a new chapter, one filled with the possibility of growth, healing, and peace. They've broken free from the emotional chains that bound them, and they're walking into a future where they can define themselves on their own terms. In the end, it's about freedom, truth, and the kind of healing that can only come when you finally choose yourself.